So hello and welcome to all of our students, faculty, staff, our alums, and friends who have joined us. My name is Carmen Rogers. I'm the Assistant Dean here at the College of Business. It's a pleasure to welcome you all to this year's Vangermeersh Endowed Lecture Series. This lecture was established in 2008 with a gift from a URI alumnus, Deborah Chofie. She's class of 1980. And in honor of her former accounting professor, Richard Vangermeersh, who retired in 2004 after 34 years of teaching. The lecture series features prominent role models from the business community to interest and inspire our students. Professor Vangermeersh is not here with us today, unfortunately, but we still want to thank him for all of his contributions to this lecture series and to the College of Business. Now, before we get started, I want to make sure that we review the protocol for today's meeting. I will serve as the moderator for this session. I will be assisted by Erin Spear, our college's marketing coordinator, who will remain kind of behind the scenes when she needs to. She's got her camera up right now, but she'll be able to answer questions in the chat feature and will be assisting with technology throughout the session. Now, we have a series of questions that we'll ask of our guest speaker in the first portion of the session today. And then we're going to transition into a question and answer period. Now, all the participants, you are automatically muted and have your videos turned off. We ask that if you have a question, you either raise your hand within the WebEx feature and state that you have a question, or you can actually just post your question in the chat. In the order that questions are identified, Erin will call your name and then turn on your camera, which will allow you to ask your question directly to our speaker. If you have any questions about this process at all while the session is being conducted, please feel free to send your questions directly to Erin in the chat. And now, I have the pleasure to welcome our speaker for this year's event, Deborah Nelson Bolks. Deborah is an accomplished businesswoman, an entrepreneur, an award-winning author, and an authority on creating best place to work organizations. She has spent over 25 years leading sales, operations, and professional services organizations within Fortune 150 technology firms. Before, she founded her own company, Business World Rising. Her company accelerates the advancement of high potential leaders within best places to work. And just over this past year, she's published 2 books. The first is The Wow Factor Workplace, How to Create a Best Place to Work Culture. And the second, Heartfelt Leadership, How to Capture the Top Spot and Keep on Soaring. We are so fortunate to have Deborah Bolks with us to share her journey. Deborah, thank you so much for joining us. Why don't we start with you telling us a little bit about yourself?
I'd be delighted to do that. And before I start down that journey, talking about it, just thank you so much for having me here today. It is quite an honor, and I can honestly say when I was attending URI as an undergraduate and then in the MBA program, I never dreamed that this day would actually be here. Of course, then we didn't have this technology, but it's quite an honor and a privilege to be joining you today, so thank you. In terms of my career, it's somewhat varied in that I actually started out not in high tech, but before I went back to school to URI to finish my undergraduate and get my master's in business administration, I was a fashion designer in Los Angeles for 5 years. So that's where I started. And then I decided I wanted to run my own company, expecting I would run a fashion design company. That's why I went back to school. And then while I was in school, I had an internship at Raytheon. And that turned me on to high tech and that whole different industry. And I ended up staying in high tech and going into leadership for the next almost 30 years. I started out after graduation at AT&T And then I went to IBM for a number of years, and then for quite some time I worked at Aero Electronics. So as you said, I've had a number of different roles in high tech, from being starting out on the technical side of house as a systems engineer, working with clients, and then I went into sales, and then into professional services. I ran international and national organizations, both from a professional services standpoint and from a business operations standpoint. So it's been a wonderful ride. Towards the end of that segment of my career, I realized as I was meeting with major corporate CEOs and VPs of engineering that I was often the only woman in the room. And I wondered why that was, because I started my high-tech career with a lot of amazing women, and there were a lot of amazing women at mid-level management, but they weren't getting to the top. And so I decided to take a break from the corporate world and look into that, do a little investigation, kind of like creating my own PhD, did some analysis on that, and then I started a leadership development company to accelerate the advancement of women into senior leadership, which I did in Southern California for a number of years. And while I was doing that, I started writing books to get all of the people who were in our program on the same page. And it took me a long time to get those first couple books written, because I did a lot of research and interviews with CEOs and executives of a variety of different companies in a variety of different industries to try to better understand what does it take to have a best place to work environment. Because if I was going to teach leadership development to anyone, I wanted them to understand how to be the best kind of leader possible to create the kind of company that people really want to work in and could never even imagine leaving because they love it so much. So for the last decade, that has been my life's mission, and it's been amazing. My whole life has been a wonderful ride, a wonderful journey. And yeah, the best is yet to come. So here I am.
That's amazing. We are so thankful that you've had such a full journey, because we really want to learn every little piece of it. Now, I have to go back and ask this question, because we have many students that are on the call today, and they really want to know. So you started at Rhode Island, or URI, from California, but we want to hear about your experience coming from California, moving to Rhode Island, and in that you have to share with us what your college life was like. Then we'll move into the business, but we want to learn a little bit more about you and what your college experience was like.
Okay. Well, first I have to back up just a little bit. As you say, I started in California. I'm actually born and raised in Southern California. And I started college as a freshman at UCLA in Los Angeles. And I have to say, it was, from an educational standpoint, it wasn't as challenging as being in a very big university environment was for me. I had lost my mother. My mother passed away while I was in high school. And when I went off to UCLA, I'm not quite sure I was ready to be on my own. I was 17 when I started going to school. And I don't know, I was a math computer science major, first of all. And I think sometimes we're not sure what to major in, and so I just majored in something that I knew I was really good at. I was great at math. I had all the AP classes. I was valedictorian in high school. I knew I was smart and I could handle things that were complicated and engineering-wise or mathematically or whatever. But once I got into it, I thought, this isn't really for me. So I switched. I ended up going to fashion design school in Los Angeles. I went to the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. And after working for 5 years, I realized I really wanted to run my own company, but not having finished my degree. One, I wanted to finish my degree, and two, I wanted to get into the business aspects of it to better understand how to run a business and how to be a leader. And it just so happened that during all of that, I got married. I married my first husband, who was an officer in the United States Navy. And he happened to be reassigned to Naval Station Newport in Rhode Island. And so we moved from California to Newport, Rhode Island, and I thought, well, this is a perfect time since I'm going to take a break from my career anyway. This is a perfect time for me to go back to school. And so I applied to the University of Rhode Island, and I cannot tell you how grateful I was because at this point in my life, I was still in my early 20s, and we didn't have a lot of money. Since I had quit my job, I wasn't working, and my husband was in the Navy, so I didn't have mom and dad's purse strings to latch onto anymore to pay for college, so it was up to me. And so I drove myself over the bridge and went to Kingston and met with the dean of the business school there, right next to where you are right now, told them my story, and I said, you know what, I'm only here for 2 years. We're going to be stationed here for 2 years, and then I don't know where they'll be repositioning us after that. But in 2 years, I have 1 year of my undergraduate degree to finish, and I want to get my MBA, which is a 2-year program. So I've got 3 years that I want to do. And now that I'm actually sitting here in your office, Dean, I don't even have a full 2 years. But I can guarantee you, if you'll take me, I'll be the best student you ever had, and you will be so proud that you had me in your school, and I will finish my undergraduate and my master's within that period of time. And I promise you I will be the best student in class. And so I was very lucky. I was able to get a loan to have my senior year paid through a loan, which that took me 3 years after college to pay that off. And I ended up graduating at the top of the class from my undergraduate. And the dean very graciously called me into his office one day and he said, you know what, we have this scholarship that we would be really honored to give to you. And I got a free ride provided to me for my master's at the University of Rhode Island. So I can't tell you how grateful I am and how fortunate I was that we ended up in Newport, Rhode Island so that I could attend the University of Rhode Island, which I absolutely loved and I still love to death to this very day. So thank you.
You can definitely hear the passion in your voice when you talk about your experience and your time here. So you talked about your education. You talked about how you ended up getting your first job at AT&T as a systems engineer. And that was quite a shift from where you began, which was in the fashion industry. So for our students, what are some skills that you learned over the course of your time that you were here at URI that really allowed you to make that pivot and also really enabled you to be so successful moving forward?
Absolutely. Well, you know, it's interesting. As I said, when I was at UCLA as a freshman, I did start out as a math computer science major. And so I was very intrigued by computers. I mean, these days, we live with computers every minute of our life, so we can't even imagine having a life without it. But back then, to use a computer, we actually had to go to school and sit in a room where they had computers set up, and we called it the computer lab, and that's where we did our computer work. And so I had computer classes as part of my undergraduate program in my senior year, and I was very intrigued by it. And I really wondered, what can we do? In fact, I already did know some of the things that we can do with computers to run a business because I got involved in that as I was a fashion designer, and that really intrigued me very much. So when an opportunity came up to take an internship at Raytheon, at Missile Systems Division, I thought this would be a great opportunity to actually get some hands-on experience working for a company in the technology end of the business. And actually the internship was to be working with the Human Resources Department and create applications that could help manage the human resources function within a major corporation. And so honestly, it was that intern program that I had, and the first semester that I did it, it was purely for credit for a class. So I needed the credit anyway, and I took that internship, and it worked out so well, and I enjoyed it so much, and I loved the people in the department so much that when that was over with and I was fully moved into my master's program, they said, you know, we'd really like you to work here. And we know you're taking 23 credits or 23 units during your MBA program, but if you could fit it in, we would love to have you work part-time. here at Raytheon, we'll pay you. And so I thought, well, yes, I can do that. I will figure out a way to do that. So yeah, I worked at Raytheon both as an intern and then later as a paid part-time employee there. And once I got into that and I started working with the end users to better understand the business and the business operations and trying to help them solve problems, how do you solve problems through technology, and working with people, which is something I found I really loved to do, was interfacing with people and helping them solve problems. I couldn't stop doing that. And so I knew before I ever left and ever started interviewing for jobs that I wasn't going back to being a fashion designer. I was going to work in technology, and I wanted to work with end customers particularly to help them solve business challenges.
Well, you have truly made a name and a career for yourself with all of your work experience and everything that you've done. It makes me think a lot about our students here who are in a major innovation and entrepreneurship. And I really think that you have a lot of advice that you can really share with them. So for our students who are currently majoring in this entrepreneurship field and are thinking about kind of getting out there on their own and starting their own business, you know, what advice would you give to them, and what can they expect along the way?
Well, as an entrepreneur, I will tell you in 2 words: be brave. You have to be willing to be a risk taker to be an entrepreneur. Now that I have been an entrepreneur for the last 10 years, I can tell you there's really a bit of a different mindset from working in a major corporation. However, I can also tell you that while I was working at IBM and when I worked at Aero Electronics, I was really quite entrepreneurial there, because after about my first 5 years in the business world, virtually every job I ever had after the first 5 years and every organization I ever worked in, I actually created. Because I found as I got into the business world and I started working directly with customers, first on the technology side as a technical support person, and then as a salesperson, and then as a sales manager, I found that there were so many interesting new and different challenges that were constantly coming up in different industries that the technology to solve their problems didn't necessarily exist. Or maybe there were services that could be provided that no one was providing. And my customers basically gave me all these wonderful ideas. And so I decided, well, yeah, we could do that. And so I took proposals back to my boss and talked them through with my manager, wherever I was at the time. And I found another thing that I will say here, in addition to being brave, never take no for an answer to something that you really believe in. If you hear no, you're going to hear no a lot, because you have to keep asking questions. You have to just keep asking and keep being able to discuss the benefit of what you are trying to deliver, the benefit to the end customer as well as the benefit to you. And if you're raising money to the people who are investing in you, how will that make money for you? How will that be profitable? What will the return on investment look like? But you've got to be brave and don't take no, just keep going and do whatever it takes to really solve problems and to make whoever your customer is, make their life easier and better. And when you always keep them in front of mind and make sure that they understand that they can trust you and you are going to follow through and you will honor your word always. Sometimes it takes a little longer than you think it might, but you've got to build a very trusting relationship. People need to know that they can trust you. But those are all things that are, they're apropos no matter whether you're an entrepreneurial person or working in a major corporation. But even if you're taking the entrepreneurial route at this point and you think you're going to start your own business, more power to you. And I think sometimes it's easier in some respects to do it when you're younger versus older because you don't have as much to lose. Everything is there's no place to go but up from here. The young people have so many wonderful ideas, and as a younger person, you're not stuck in the mindset of, oh, we've tried that before and it didn't work, so we're not going to do that. The fact of the matter is, and again, this applies whether you're an entrepreneur or you're working in a major corporation, just because something's been done before, the situation has never been the same situation that you're in. It's never been the same people. It's never been exactly the same what's going on and left to right in the world. So again, that's another time, never take no for an answer. If you believe in what it is you're trying to accomplish, keep going for it, keep pushing for it. And sometimes what you really need to focus on is how do you tell your elevator speech? What do you say in a very short period of time? But then also, how do you really convince people what's in it for them and why they should jump on board with you?
I love your enthusiasm. You are making me excited just listening to you talk about, just being brave and don't take no for an answer. I mean, these are truly the words that our students need to hear. I mean, certainly we all recognize the environment that we're in. It's ever changing. I mean, no one could have expected that we would be dealing with, a pandemic right now. And so I'm sure that there's, a lot of concern from our students. They are thinking about the future and knowing that you can still be brave, you can take these risks, you can do what you love, and you can't take no for an answer has got to be kind of a powerful mantra for them. So I'm thankful that you shared that, because I think there are a lot of students, not just students, but staff and faculty and alums and friends that are on the call today that really kind of needed to hear those encouraging words to keep moving forward. So we all thank you for that optimism. Now, I do want to shift the conversation a little bit and talk about your business, your company now. So the mission of Business World Rising, the company you founded, is to teach organizations how to cultivate work cultures. You talk about heartfelt leaders at every level and inspiring teams to be the best that they can be. So kind of as we're on this theme of motivation and kind of keep pushing forward, how can our students be the best? How can they be the best interns, the best students, the best people, and eventually be leaders, the best leaders? What would you say to them?
Well, here's another mantra. So I gave you be brave, don't take no for an answer. My next one is attitude is everything. So just think about it. Wherever you've been, whether it's been a place where you've worked, whether you volunteered there, maybe it's at a community association or something there on campus, think about the things that make it fun and a place that you want to be part of. It's usually because the people who are there are great people. You just love being around them. And so the first thing to always keep in mind is how can you continually motivate yourself and be the kind of person you would want to be around, that people like to be around, that you're fun to be around, that you've got great ideas and you don't take no for an answer. Sometimes you do take no for an answer. Sometimes you sit back and you listen and you listen and listen and learn. But I can just tell you that everything in terms of having a great place to work and a wonderful work culture, you'd like to say, well, it's really the CEO who sets that, and hopefully that's true. But sometimes companies don't have an intention that they pay attention to at all times. Culture actually can happen by accident. Hopefully culture is created and nourished because you want it to be a certain way. But even if you're working in an organization that overall may not have the best culture, it may not be the place you want to work forever, you have the ability to turn your little piece of that organization in the best place there is to be. Because if you are somebody that other people want to be around, all of a sudden that rubs off. That impacts other people and their attitudes. And so what makes healthy attitudes, what makes great places to work is you've got a lot of people who all feel great and feel lucky to be working with each other. And by being together, you bring out the best in each other. And that's what real leadership is all about. It's not having a position that says, I'm at the top of the pyramid, I'm the CEO, so I'm going to set the culture and I'm going to make you great. I mean, hopefully you have a CEO who will do that. But you can be anywhere in the organization. You can be in the middle of the organization. You can be the lowest level employee. I mean, just think, perhaps you can even think of somewhere you've been, maybe at the library, maybe you've been in a restaurant, maybe you've been at church, whatever. You've been someplace and you happen to meet someone who happens to be a maintenance person, or maybe they're the janitor cleaning the restrooms, but they're going around smiling and they say, good morning. Wow, it's great to see you. It brings a smile to your face. Well, these are not necessarily the top of the ladder, but they are leaders in their own right by making other people feel good that they're there and you're glad they are part of the team. So hopefully that's a little bit of it.
I love that. I love the way in which you show how appreciative you are of the CEO of the company, but then also the other employees within the company as well that may not be as high on the ladder within the organization. That certainly shows a caring attitude, and that is a leadership quality that I think everyone should have, recognizing that it's not just the CEO, but it is all of us who are putting forth energy to make the organization great. And that's fantastic that you brought that up. You did mention a buzzword, and I will use that to ask my next question, which is, so I know that you have worked with students from the Florida State College at Jacksonville. And so you talked about CEO, but in this particular role, you created, along with your students, you created a 10-part series called the CEO Mentoring Moments with Deb Bulks. Now, this is an idea that I learned from which you learned from your intern, if I'm correct. So I want to know more about the experience of working with these CEOs. And I have to ask, because we do have students, I also want to know if you can share a little bit about how your intern came up with this great idea to really get into the minds of these CEOs. So please share and talk about this series and talk about what you've learned.
Oh, absolutely. So I have to tie this back to my own internship at Raytheon as a URI student. I learned so much as an intern, and I found that I wasn't the only one there. There were other interns as well. But I found as an intern, as an unpaid person, you can bring value to that company. That's why they bring you on board. And sometimes interns who haven't worked in the business world before come up with ideas that, wow, we wouldn't have even thought of that, because we see things totally differently. So because of that, I have over the years, as I've been both in the corporate world and a hiring manager, and also as an entrepreneur running my own company, I always take advantage of bringing interns into the organization. Sometimes they're paid internships, sometimes they're not. But I love working with college students, whether they're undergraduates, graduates, and I've even worked with high school seniors, because I love the creativity and I love the fact that they are so open-minded. They're sponges, you know, they'll just take everything in and ask really great questions and ask you why, and you're like, well, I haven't even thought about why we do it this way, we just do, but they make me think. And one of the things that I talk about in my books, in the leadership books, is going back to your prior question, you know, what makes a great place to work? Well, what makes a great place to work for one person is maybe different for other people. But for you as an individual, what makes it a great place to work is, one, you're around people you really love being around, but most of all, you're doing something you love to do. You love what you're doing. And so when I have the opportunity to bring an intern on board, even though I may have an idea for what I want this intern to do, I try to keep it open enough such that I don't make it so structured that you come here and you're going to do this. You have to fit into this little square box. I'll bring them in because I'll say I'd like some help. In fact, this is exactly what happened with this one intern. I wanted some assistance in social media. However, the young man that was very strongly recommended to me by a couple of the professors at Florida State said, he's a finance guy. He's not even a marketing guy. And he uses social media, but he's not really an expert in it. But he really wants to have this intern program with you. So I said, okay, great, bring him on down. So I sat down with him and I said, Elton, tell me a little bit about, what you like to do, what you love to do. And he said, okay, sure, I will. And we kind of had that conversation. And he said, but I'm really, really interested in these books that you just wrote and how I can help you market those. And, you don't mention when we just have this conversation and you're telling me who your target audience is, which my target audience, I thought for my books, was people who are either in management in corporations or small businesses, whatever. They were already managers or high potential candidates to move into management. And he said, that's all great, and I can see why you would be targeting them, but I think you're really missing the boat, Miss Deb, is what he calls me. He said, I think you should be targeting some of this, especially the Wow Factor workplace. You ought to be targeting college students. And I said, really? Why do you think? Tell me. I'd like to know more about that. And he said, well, honestly, we don't know anything, especially about what it's like to be a CEO. Some of us have worked for companies. Maybe we've worked at McDonald's. Maybe we worked at UPS or Amazon. Maybe we worked for the coffee shop down the road. But almost none of us, no matter what size company we've worked in, we have no idea what it's like to be the CEO. What is it like to run a company? And I would really love it if I could ask somebody questions and get information on what the heck is it like to be the CEO, and do they even think about people like us when they make decisions? And I said, well, that is really interesting. So I said, okay, so how, understanding you would like to have answers to that, how can we turn that into something that you can do for me to help me market my books, and whether it's social media or whatever, you tell me. So I now grant you Entrepreneurism 101, King of the Hill. You're now the king entrepreneur. Think about this as your little company, and you are my marketing company, and I am bringing you in, and you're going to create a proposal for me, and you're going to help me market my book to college students. How are we going to do that? And he's the one that came up with the idea to create a series of videos, short, very short. He says they have to be really short. We don't have a lot of time, but it should be something that we could, look at on our cell phones and maybe look at while we're in between classes or whatever, and just get some questions answered. And so maybe I could give you some questions and we could video you answering them. And I said, well, okay, that sounds great, but you know what? I think it'd be really great if you were on camera too. Asking me the questions, and let's make this more about you as the student, and I'll answer your questions. And so it really, that whole series came directly from my intern. And then I said, okay, so you and I alone can't do this. We need some other resources, people that know how to do all the filming and everything else. And he went out and found the students. He pulled the entire team together, and I basically sat back and they told me what we were going to do, and they told me when to show up, what to wear. And I just sat back, and they gave me all the instructions, other than they didn't give me the answers. I didn't even know the questions that they were going to ask until I sat down in front of the camera. But my intern group, Elton and his team, put that whole thing together, and I think it turned out to be just outstanding. And it was a thrill and wonderful for me to participate in that, and I was so impressed. So that's another time. You don't have to wait to get out of college to be an entrepreneur. Start while you're there.
I love it. I love it. I have been working in student support services for many, many years. And one of the things that kind of hurts my heart is when I talk to students who are interning and they're not getting the valuable experience. And hearing you actually trusting your interns and allowing them to kind of bring you the ideas, and then you know, letting them be the boss and letting them control and take over, and seeing what ideas come from that. That is just the best way to learn. It allows them to continue to be creative and to think through, you know, a project from the beginning to the end. You know, those are the types of opportunities that we seek out for our students here. And it's great to hear that you are allowing students to grow within your organizations, and they're learning. So that's wonderful. I actually want to kind of build on that momentum a little bit and pivot a little bit, if you don't mind. I have one last question, but I really want to save it and turn to Erin and ask her if, in fact, we have any students that would like to really ask you a question, because I'm sure there are students here who are interested in learning more about you and learning more about opportunities. So for all of our participants, and not just students, we have alums, we have faculty, we have staff who have joined us. If you would like to ask Deb a question, please feel free to either select the raise your hand icon within the WebEx chat feature, or directly ask your question. Let Erin know that you have a question, and she can call on you. And we will turn your video on, because we want you to have that one-on-one time with Deborah. So if you have a question, please feel free to reach out to Erin right now and ask her. So Erin, I don't know, do we have any questions already?
So we have one question from Sabrina. So Sabrina, I don't know if you are there and want to turn on your camera. You can. You are.
Sorry, I just downloaded the app, so it's still a little bit buggy.
Here you are.
I have a question. So you have had a fantastic, diversified career so far, and it's honestly really incredible. But through that, have you had some big challenges that have kind of changed the way you think about things or approach problems and situations as they come in now?
Oh my goodness, yes. I mean, everybody's life is full of challenges. So don't let me make everyone think that my life has been perfect the entire way. There's always challenges to deal with, but the important thing is to, again, keep a positive attitude, keep that a can-do attitude at all times. And in fact, one of the things that I was going to share early on, and I know that I've had a little conversation with Carmen about it before, I didn't have a perfect life before I went to college. As a matter of fact, I had a life I didn't want anyone to really even know about. Well, I was a smart kid. As I mentioned earlier, I was valedictorian in high school, but my home life was not fun. And when I said that I lost my mother when I was in high school, and I grew up in an alcoholic home, and it really wasn't fun at all. And so I spent most of my time at school, in programs, on the drill team, wherever I could. I was a volunteer at the hospital. I was a candy striper when I was a teenager. And I did everything I could to not go home. And I did not want my friends to know what my private life was like. After the time I was about 12 years old, I didn't bring friends to my house. I rode my bike or walked wherever, and I would go elsewhere. And that was quite a stigma for me. I never wanted anyone to know. And I think something that may be common in people who go through situations like this, for some reason, I never thought about it in these words at the time, but you always feel guilty. You feel very guilty that you are in that kind of environment, and you must be doing something wrong to even be there. And sometimes you tend to blame yourself. But one thing that I knew from the get-go was this was not going to define me. Who my parents were wasn't going to define me. whether they were highly successful or not at all, failures. And believe me, I've had both ends of the spectrum. That was probably the biggest challenge I had early in life, and I had to overcome that. And I was very lucky in that when I was a junior in high school, a long story, but I ended up taking care of my mother in a town at the beach that wasn't where we went to, where I was in high school, wasn't where we lived. And I started missing a lot of school taking care of my mother. And because we were living in this other town and I didn't go to school there, and finally I decided, you know what, I can't miss this much school. This isn't right. And I marched myself down to the local high school in this other town, and I enrolled in high school there. I just enrolled myself. And on that very first day in school, as I was sitting waiting outside the counselor's office to get accepted and do all the paperwork to get admitted into the high school, I met this other young girl in the same class I was in. And we ended up becoming very, very best friends. And I started going to her house after school, and we came just really super close. And then things were so bad at home, and I started just hanging out at their house all the time. I was always there for dinner. And fortunately, she had a dad. Her mom stayed home and took care of the house. She had 4 brothers and sisters, so I was just another face at the table. And her dad was an executive at IBM. And if you read my bio, that's one of the companies I ended up working for, although I didn't go to work there right after college. I could have. They interviewed me and they offered me a job, but that was one of those times where I felt like by then this other family had become my parents, and I didn't want it to look like I followed on my dad's coattails, and so I deliberately turned down the offer by IBM to go work there after school. In fact, I interviewed at IBM while I was there at URI. I got offers from IBM, I got an offer from AT&T, and I got an offer from, at the time, it was the Big Six accounting firms, their consulting organizations. I got an offer from every one of them. And I wanted to work for a place like IBM, so I ended up taking the job at AT&T. But just to put things into perspective at a point in time where you can understand challenges, maybe you can relate to that challenge, maybe not, but we all have challenges in our life, and it really is how you keep a positive mindset, how to keep a can-do attitude. Don't let anything get in your way, and just stay positive and just keep going. Don't let other people bring you down.
Thank you so much for that. Sabrina, thank you so much for your question. Erin, do we have any other questions?
We do. We have 2 more.
Okay.
So, Deb Iamundi, who is a professor at the College of Business, has a question. So, Deb, I put your video on, and I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask it.
Thank you, Erin. And thank you for sharing your stories, your insights, and your advice. Appreciate it. My question is, if you had it to do all over again, what would you do differently?
Oh, wow. I know this sounds like a cop-out, but if I did anything differently in my life, I wouldn't be where I am today. And I love my life. In spite of the fact that there are challenges, and there always will be, and maybe it's my attitude, but I have loved every place I've ever been. Sometimes through life situations, you have to move. Maybe you need to relocate somewhere else. When I left IBM for a personal reason, I loved working at IBM. I thought it was a fantastic place. I loved the ability to be very anti-bureaucratic. Sometimes I think if I could have done anything over again, I wouldn't have left IBM when I did, but the situation was what it was, and the only way, at the time I was working for IBM, and at that particular point in time, I was based in Phoenix, Arizona, which at IBM in the old days, they used to call it, I've been moved. That's what IBM used to stand for. So we would get moved around to different places, and I didn't want to move to Phoenix. I couldn't imagine not living 5 miles from the ocean. I mean, I'd always lived near the ocean wherever I was, whether I was in Newport, Rhode Island or Newport Beach, California. I didn't want to go work for IBM in Phoenix, but I did, and I thought, well, it's a 2-year assignment. I can live anywhere for 2 years, and it turned out I loved it. But then, because by then I had children, I had 2 little boys, and my husband, my first husband, the naval officer, he and I were divorced in California after we had gone from Rhode Island back to California. The marriage failed. And, you know, so things just aren't always perfect. And part of the reason I moved to Phoenix was I had a wonderful career opportunity, and it would have been a great place to raise these little boys in a place where I could afford it to do that on my own income and my own salary. But they were going back and forth between Phoenix and Southern California, and I thought this just isn't fair to the children to make them fly back and forth. And then they got old enough to be in school and back and forth between school in Phoenix and school in California. So I've got to get back to California. And I tried really hard to move my career, take another job in Southern California, and IBM was going through some real difficult times then, and they were cutting back on staff in the Southern California area where I had originally come from, and there just really wasn't anything interesting for me to go back to. And so I ended up leaving IBM and took a job elsewhere, and you know that was great. I took a nice promotion, and I went off in a different direction with a different company, and everything worked out terrifically. But I really hated that. I hated leaving IBM at that moment. So that was one of the hard things to do. Would I have changed it? You know, I don't know, because I know how it all played out now. So sometimes you just have to make decisions, and sometimes you feel like you're not facing the best options. You wish you had this one other option, and it would be this. You make the best of what you can do at the time, and you go with it, and you make the best of it. And whenever you do that, life is going to work out. So that's a great question, Deborah. Thank you for asking that.
Thank you, Deb. And Deb, the next question is from Shannon. Shannon, I've put your video on and I'm going to unmute you if you want to ask your question now.
Hi. So as a woman, obviously it's a very male-dominated field. You said you were one of the I was just wondering if there's anything you did personally to like feel like you were standing out or anything you discussed.
I didn't. You were cutting out on me a little bit there. Maybe Carmen or Aaron, if you could repeat the question for me.
The question was, you've worked in a pretty male-dominated industry all your career, and what, as a female, what can she and other females do to help themselves stand out?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, you're going to stand out anyway if you're a female in a male-dominated environment. You look different and you behave differently than everybody else. I would say the most important thing to do is be yourself. Don't try to be someone you're not. People, whether they're men or women, like to be around other people who are genuine and that we can trust you are who you are. And then going back to one of the things that I said earlier, be brave. Don't be afraid to speak up. And this applies no matter whether you're working with men or women, but particularly when you're working with men, you will find that typically men have an easier time stating their case, presenting ideas. If they disagree with a decision or if you're having dialogue in a conference room, men are not typically as shy as women in stating their opinion and stating why they believe what they do. Women tend to be quiet. I don't know whether we think we're being polite or we're afraid to speak up. I know myself early on, I was afraid to say something because early on, maybe I didn't know as much as everybody else, and I didn't want to make the mistake of saying something wrong. But I'll tell you, anytime you are where you are, if you are in a conference room, people want to hear from you. So be thoughtful and just don't speak over everybody. But believe me, people want to hear what you think. People want to hear what you have to say, as long as you are respectful, that you put things in a positive manner, and you talk about the benefit of doing whatever it is you want to do. And sometimes you may be asked a question that you don't really know the answer to. You should still say, well, based on what I know, and maybe you can help me understand your perspective, but this is what I think. And then say it in simple words. And then say, based on that, what do you think? Let's talk about that and listen. So that's, if you can, what they call stay in a game, play the game, it's really not a game, it's just life. But you will stand out if you do that. If you just be who you are, don't be afraid, be part of the team, be a team player. If you can be a great team player, that actually shows you will probably be a good leader as well, because the good leaders are also really good followers and great team members. So that's my advice.
Thank you. If anyone else has any more questions, feel free to submit. Otherwise, we can wrap it up. And Carmen or Deb, if you want to say a final couple words to all of our students, alumni, and faculty and staff on the call.
Carmen, I think you said you had a special question.
Oh, you're right.
Well, I had a question that I was holding just in case we needed to. And so that question is, you talk a lot, and actually this actually is a great segue into the kind of the closing of this meeting. But you talk a lot about the power of paying it forward. How has that motto played a role in your life, and why is it so important to you?
Oh, my goodness. So paying it forward started back a long time ago, as I told you, my story as a young person and how I ended up living with a family who became my family, because not only was, when I was younger, my mother was an alcoholic, my father just kind of left, and so I was just kind of there by myself, sometimes taking care of my mother, sometimes she was in a home, and I was totally alone sitting in this house. So I lived with another family, and honestly, I honestly don't know what would have happened to me if they hadn't come into my life. Yeah, that's just one of those things. If I had it to do over again, I feel so blessed that, you wish you didn't have a mother who was an alcoholic. You wish you had a father who was home and not gone. But those things happen. But this wonderful family took me in like I was one of theirs. They never asked me questions about my life and why are you here every night having dinner with us. They just knew that it was a situation and I needed to be taken in. And they put me back on an even keel. They made me feel good about myself, that no matter what my background was, I could accomplish anything, and that they believed in me, and they would do whatever they could to try to, be my sounding board, be my mentors, and help me get to whatever that next stage of my life was. But you know what? It took me until I was 30 years old. I mean, I was way out of URI. I was out in the corporate world. I was doing all kinds of things. It took me until I was 30 years old to be able to finally sit down and tell them why I was living in their home. And I said, I don't even know how to thank you. I don't know how I will ever repay you for what you've done for me, because my life would not be what it is without you. And in fact, the Heartfelt Leadership book is dedicated to them. If you open that book, you will see it's dedicated to Bob and Nancy. And Bob and Nancy are the two, my best friends, Mom and Dad, who became my parents. And they, to this day, they're in their late 80s, and they are still my Mom and Dad. I said, how do I thank you? How can I repay you? I just don't even know what I can do that would be enough. And they said, all we want you to do is pay it forward. And it may not be doing this. It may not be taking a kid into your home and giving them a place to live and a place to come back to. There may be any million of other things that happen in people's lives. But if you always keep this in mind and pay it forward to other people, and then just let us know what you did, that will pay us back. So that's what we want, is you pay what we have done for you, you pay that forward. So honestly, paying things forward has been the greatest joy of my life. That makes me I'm not even an emotional person, but that's one thing that makes me emotional. Paying it forward is so important, and so I would say that to all of you. And Carmen, I'm so grateful that you asked me this question, because I've given you mantras about great attitude, be brave, all of those things. But I think the greatest thing to take away from all of this is all your life, focus on paying it forward to others. And when you do that, you will live in the happiest place on earth. And I early on, even in high school, I worked at Disneyland, which is the happiest place on earth, so they say. And I have been lucky enough to find a way to make all of my life and everywhere I was the happiest place on earth, because I try to pay it forward to others. And I wish each of you that gift.
Thank you so much for those beautiful words. That was the perfect ending to a fantastic conversation and a wonderful journey into your life. I hope that all of us, everyone who's participated on this call can really take that and use it and hopefully benefit someone else and give back. Those are just wonderful words, Deb. We really thank you and appreciate you for your inspiration, your hard work. This has been an opportunity to really be on the receiving end of all of your work and your efforts, and we could not thank you enough. Thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate it. Before we end today's session, I do want to let our participants know that you will receive a follow-up email and a survey after this particular session that's being sent by the college. There will be information about Deborah's publications and the work that she's done. We certainly encourage you to read her books, to read up on her biography, to learn more about her life and how she's been able to share it with all of us and many others across this country. For your participation today, and for those of you who complete the survey, we do have a signed copy of Deborah's book, one of her books, Wow Factor, that we want to give to our participants for being with us this afternoon. So make sure that you complete that survey when you do receive that email. Again, Deborah, thank you so much for your time and your commitment to making all of us better people. We appreciate it so much. And thank you all again for attending this afternoon, and have a wonderful evening. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.